In your mind, when people say that an anime just gave them chills, shivers, or goosebumps, is that just an expression, something people say during a particularly intense emotional moment? Or are they actually having a physical response? And if they are, what causes it? Why does it exist? And how can we make sure it happens as often as humanly possible? The incredibly addictive and overwhelming experience I'm talking about is known as frisson, a feeling that only around 2/3 of people can even experience, and if you're one of the unlucky few who can't, I'll do my best to explain, but it's sort of tough. Imagine trying to explain an entirely new emotion to someone who's never felt it before. When an anime overwhelms you with joy, sorrow, or even anxiety, your brain is flooded with adrenaline, triggering a fight or flight response. In a series of waves, the skin on your lower back flexes as shivers spread inward from the shoulders and up the neck, extending into your cheeks and across your entire scalp. Your face becomes flush, your pupils dilate, and all the hair on your limbs stands straight up. I realize how dramatic this all sounds, but for people like me, frisson is the driving force behind why I even watch anime in the first place. It's a high that I am constantly chasing. Typically, the experience only lasts several seconds, but if you find the correct trigger that aligns completely intangibly with the wiring of your brain, then it can become almost voluntary and on occasion be extended for minutes on end. And by combining my personal experience with actual scientific research, by the end of this video, you should be able to trigger frisson with nothing more than your memories. Although frisson has been studied somewhat extensively, just about everything I could find on the topic always related back to music and not video. But for me, the only songs that have ever caused the feeling are from anime that I've already seen, as they carry with them all the memories and emotions of the characters. So maybe what causes frisson is the perfect combination of music synchronizing with the emotions being portrayed on screen. But there are a few obvious examples that contradict this theory. The first being kono katachi, or a silent voice, which is concrete evidence that not only is music not the only trigger, but in fact the absence of music can be far more powerful. The climax of the entire film is actually completely silent. We are only shown images of fireworks erupting above Ogaki, which is actually an incredibly common trope in anime. But fireworks typically represent enjoying your youth, making new friends, or finding true love. But in this case, the director Naoko Yamada uses them as a distraction, representing the way that everything is fine on the surface, but while the community is brought closer together, Nishimiya is completely alone with her thoughts, and for a brief moment, we experience the world as she does, silent. Similar motifs are used in two of Shinkai's films as well, first during the rocket launch in 5 centimeters per second, and then later during Mitsuha's disappearance in Your Name. All three of these scenes use silence to divert your expectations, so it's actually just your own anticipation that once violated can startle the automatic nervous system and cause your brain to flood with dopamine, in a similar way that drugs and sex do. But this explains why the feeling is literally chemically addictive. The director has to perfectly skirt the line between following conventions close enough to build up your expectations, but then subvert them at the last moment to physically overwhelm your brain. But it's not just leaps from loud to silent that triggers frisson. Even just sudden changes in tone or clashing of notes can cause the feeling. And although both of those are musical descriptions, I think they can easily be applied to anime visuals as well. And what's so fascinating about that is the extra step your brain has to take in order to read the subtitles, process the information, and then take in the art, in no way seems to hinder your ability to experience the moment as a whole. Sudden changes in tone can apply to when people snap and act out of character, changing the mood of a scene in an instant. Take this scene from Evangelion, for example. If there's one thing we know about Shinji, it's that he's incredibly passive and, at times, whiny. Rather than attempt to understand himself enough to express his thoughts to others, he just responds to every question with "Oi." By this point in the story, it's well established that the only thing he fears more than himself is his father. But when Commander Ikari crosses the line, taking control over Unit 1 and forcing Shinji to act against his will, he snaps. And everything we thought we knew about Shinji is tossed aside as he goes on a rampage through the Geofront. Despite the emotions of this scene being polar opposite to the despair of Kono Katachi, the feeling of Friesen is identical. So far, all my examples have been fairly extreme, but I don't think the stakes or severity of the situation has any effect on the strength of your brain's response. It really is just about using character development to trick the audience into thinking they understand how a character feels. Even the most subtle and intimate diversion can overwhelm the brain, like this scene from Origaru Season 2, when Stoic Hikigaya finally drops his guard and attempts to express his incredibly complicated and genuine emotions for the first time. Personally, for me, the anime that most easily triggers Friesen has to be Your Name, and I think unsurprisingly, a lot of that can be attributed to the band Radwimp's work on the movie's OST, especially during this scene. Shortly after Mitsuha's first meeting with Taki, the comet is falling and she is sprinting to warn her father, but in her panic, trips over a crack in the cement and brutally rolls down a hill. She lands with her hand up next to her head, reminding her that Taki had written his name down there so she couldn't forget it. But as she slowly opens her hand, it is revealed that rather than his name, all Taki wrote was "I love you." And what's so strange about this example in particular is that the Friesen I get from watching it pales in comparison to watching a video of a live orchestra playing Sparkle, the song from this scene. The feeling I get from the live musicians is infinitely more intense, despite there being no anticipation and subversion going on. But there's something special about seeing a collection of people who have all had a shared response to the song performing together, and it somehow manages to surpass the original work that it's celebrating. I could go on and on listing examples from incredible anime like Violet Evergarden, Your Lie in April, Ghibli films, Monogatari, A Place Further Than the Universe, but I think it's clear that none of these scenes would have the effect on me they do with just the music. There's some connection between how I perceive the world based on my life experience and what the artists have created. There are two aspects of Friesen that I struggle to wrap my head around. The first is that the feeling isn't just a fluke. Directors somehow know what combination of sounds, images, and story will cause people on the other side of the globe to react so strongly, which is a talent that I really don't think I'll ever fully understand. And the second is just how many people can all connect and identify with these stories, despite coming from totally different backgrounds and potentially having very few things in common. There's just something intrinsic about being a human that causes our brains to chemically react at the sight of cartoon high schoolers trying to make sense of their lives while they enjoy their youth. What is it about all of our lives that draws us to these stories while driving other people away? It really is next to impossible to try and explain your interests. It feels like something that just happens to you rather than under your control, like what foods you like the taste of. It's just hardwired into your brain, and we aren't capable of putting the reasons why into words. What I said at the beginning of this video about making Friesen into a voluntary experience was really not an exaggeration. Although it's next to impossible to predict what new anime will give you this feeling, you can always think back on the ones that hit closest to home for you. And with enough practice, you can send shivers down your spine whenever and wherever you want. But as far as I can tell, there's a limit to how many times you can do this. So after a few waves, you need to let your body recharge. Which if you think about what you're doing, it's literally insane. Every time I think about A Silent Voice, or Radwimps, or even Lord of the Rings, I'm essentially flexing a muscle that causes goosebumps to rise and engulfs my body in shivers. How more people aren't talking about this is a mystery to me, but what I do know is whether it be movies, music, books, or anime, there's something about art that ties together everyone. Regardless of where you're from, what you believe, or who you are, we're all connected by the same strange, tingly, overwhelming feeling that is Friesen. I'm dying to know if any of you even understand what I'm talking about, so if you do, please let me know in the comments what specific scenes trigger Friesen for you. And if you do have similar taste to me, I think you'll really enjoy this playlist here, which is a deep dive on what makes my favorite directors so special. And as we always say here on Kinda Neat, treasure the experience. Dreams fade after you wake up. And I just got Friesen.